It's been a turbulent week in the Trump administration, from hours of damning testimony from the president's former personal lawyer to the collapse of nuclear talks with North Korea. To help navigate the different twists and turns, we turn to Shields and Brooks. That's syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. Welcome to both of you. Are you ready to navigate the twists and turns?
Just another week in Caligula's Rome.
Ooh, all right, on that note, we're going to talk about Michael Cohen's testimony all day long this Wednesday, David, before the House Oversight Committee, Government Oversight Committee. What was your main takeaway from it?
There were some things we learned. We learned that Trump asked about the Moscow building project all the way through the campaign. We learned about the $35,000 check there. We learned a few things. But to me, it was more a moral occasion more than anything else.
A moral occasion.
A moral occasion. What it illustrates is a president, and frankly, Michael Cohen, who long ago decided that celebrity and wealth is more important than being a good person. And they've dragged us all down there with us. And the people they've dragged most effectively are the House Republicans, a lot of them on that committee, who decided that they were completely incurious about whether Donald Trump was a good guy or a bad guy or a really awful guy, that their own leader, they didn't seem to care about that, but they were going to rip the skin off Michael Cohen. And so they attacked him, and what struck me is how moral corrosion happens, that you decide you're going to defend or ignore Trump, and then to do that, you have to morally distance yourself from him. And then you have to morally distance yourself from him every day. And eventually you just get numb to everything. And so Jim Jordan and other people on the committee were saying, oh, we all knew this. Like, it's all unremarkable. And so that's how moral corrosion happens.
How did you see what role did the Republican questioning take when most of them went after Michael Cohen, rather than talking about President Trump?
They took the old attack route, Judy, which is if you can't argue the substance, you go after the source. If you can't deal with the message, you shoot the messenger. And that's what their whole strategy was. The very fact that not a single member of the Republican committee defended Donald Trump or what he was charged or alleged to have done, to me was revealing. They just decided to go after Michael Cohen. Now, Michael Cohen's defects are there. They're on the record. He's going to pay for them, the legal defects in particular. But there was no payoff for him to lie. The Mueller crowd was sitting there, the Robert Mueller's special counsel office. They know exactly what he said. If he said anything that was false, or perjured himself, he faced further problems from them. So there was a strong incentive for him not to lie. And to me, it reminded me of Scripture's injunction that the meek will inherit the earth. If that's the case, then congressional Republicans someday will be land barons, because they are the meekest, most docile, most submissive group of people when it comes to any judgment at all, any opinion on what Donald Trump does.
But David, go ahead.
What strikes me is that they don't fear final judgment. I don't mean that in the ultimate sense. Just like primary judgment. The idea that you can side and suborn your soul to someone who lies constantly, and that you won't ultimately pay for that. How does that work? Michael Cohen ultimately paid. In my suspicion, Donald Trump will ultimately pay. Most people who lie and cheat their way through life ultimately pay. Maybe some get away from it. But why you would want to hitch your career to that kind of wagon is just a mystery to me, because that's just not the way the law of the universe works.
But of course, the Republican argument, Mark, is that Michael Cohen is a flawed character, that he's lied before, he's lied a lot. Why should we believe him now?
Well, I just come back to there was no incentive, and there was a strong disincentive for him to lie in his appearance under oath on television before the world. So, everybody in the world could hear what he was saying, and it could be stacked up to what he had previously said and sworn to. So, no, and he acknowledged the fact. You spend 10 years with Donald Trump, and it's going to come at a moral cost. I'm sorry. That is the lesson we've learned. The one person in this entire administration that has gotten away with a reputation enhanced, it seems to be Nikki Haley. Everybody else who's near him is somehow tarnished, diminished, hurt, wounded. by that association. It is absolutely remarkable. And I think
You, Dan Coates. There you can think of a few, but
Dan
the
Coates,
thing,
yeah.
the
Dan
thing,
Coates, you're
he's
right.
the director of national intelligence.
Yeah.
The thing that got me about Cohen is how many times did you become a thug to small businessmen to stiff them for dealing with the
Yep.
Trump administration? 500 times.
Yeah.
And so that's I don't know if it's illegal or what, but it's unbecoming in the extreme. And so I don't treat Michael Cohen as sort of the repented, Chuck Colson. I mean, I think he didn't have any of the air of someone who's really repented or really faced the spiritual music. He's just decided one side is against his interest, which is Donald Trump, and now the other side is for his interest, so he'll say things that are nice for his interest. I don't think he lied. I think what he told was basically the truth. But he was basically catering now to the left in some sort of GoFundMe campaign that'll help pay his legal bills.
But does this advance?
I
Mark,
mean,
go ahead.
I don't know. I don't have that kind of moral X-ray. I mean, I don't know if he was a sinner and became a saint. I will say this: the story of 500 people. Did you threaten entities? Did you threaten on Donald Trump's behalf? It was a good question asked by Congressman Spire from California, and it was and he said 500, 50, 100, 200, 500. Let's say 500. But the thing about it is when he stiffed those small business, the plumbers and the electricians who did the work in the Trump projects, and he came back, and Donald Trump loved to hear about it. I mean, reveled in it. Now, I mean, at what point do you say there's no honor here? I mean, there's nothing to admire.
And he made a point of telling that, of
Yes.
of sharing that.
That's
that
right. He
anecdote
did. I
with
mean,
the-
no, he
with
was
the president.
He was not. He did not set out to flatter.
But quickly to both of you, does this advance the case against Donald Trump? Advance the case of impeachment, David?
I think a little. We know the Trump Tower stuff in Moscow, the hush money. I tend to think there's much more, and actually, everybody agrees, and I agree too, that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, did a very good job of laying down specific questions towards specific predicates, and she focused quite a lot on the business side of the Trump empire. And if I'm a Republican, I'm thinking there's a lot of bad news to come from there. And just whether it's taxes fraud, whether it's other things, and that's what the Southern District of New York is looking into. And so I think I'm less concerned that there seems to be less to the Russia collusion and a lot more to everything else.
I agree. I mean, he advanced the collusion case, not at all, but he certainly laid out. I mean, he gave them leads, suggestions, people to talk to interview, and I'd say enough stuff to keep several committees going. I did want to give a shout out to Elijah Cummings, the chairman of the committee. I thought he did a good job. I mean, I thought there was an earnestness and a directness about him, and I thought his summation is worth repeating and thinking about for all Americans. That this is important, and we've got to return to normal. This is not normal.
And handle some very delicate moments. To North Korea, David, the president went over, I think, with some high expectations of what was going to come out of that, but came back empty-handed. Was there, and we've talked on this program about whose responsibility that was. There's disagreement about whether it's the U.S. or the North Koreans. But what does this tell us about Trump foreign policy and the approach to foreign policy?
I actually give the Trump administration a fair bit of credit on this. You would talk to people 2 years ago who really knew the North Korean situation from the inside, and they were terrified. I would ask people with security clearances, is it better or worse than I think? They said it's way worse. And so we were in scary times with a pseudo-confrontation with a nuclear armed power. And now we're in a much better place. So it's better to talk. It's better to just at least keep them engaged. It's better to probe to see if there's anybody in the regime who's willing to be semi-decent. And if it's not there, you walk away from the deal. And I'm frankly glad Donald Trump walked away from a deal rather than have a cheap political win. So are we in a good place? No, but we're in a lot better place than we were 2 years ago. And I think the administration's policy has been basically reasonable.
Is he right to leave with no deal? Yes, absolutely. It had to bother him that the professionals, both in diplomacy and intelligence, who had been skeptical, openly skeptical about the whole deal were vindicated and were validated. After such a euphoric and ecstatic first date, it was almost inevitable that the couple would run into roadblocks and some rumbles in the road, and that's what happened. I mean, there's 50 years after he was first asked to go there by his country, Donald Trump went to Vietnam, and I think that what he never came to deal with is that North Korea rather is not only the least democratic with the least economic freedom of any country in the world. It's 43rd of the 43 countries in the Pacific Asian region economic development. The only reason we pay any attention to North Korea is that they have nuclear weapons.
Right.
And the idea that he's going to give up his identity, his reality, and the whole raison d'etre for his country to exist, I think was just a pipe dream.
Yeah. If I could revise and extend my remarks, I said it was reasonable policy. The emotional atmospherics are appalling. Like to say this guy is my friend, I like him, he didn't kill an American.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a regime that practices slavery. They practice slavery.
And
kill
worse.
people, and worse.
That's right.
Yeah, and mass murder. So the idea that emotionally we can buddy up to the guy, that part I want to add is appalling.
And
I accept his addition.
And speaking of that, what the president had to say about Otto Warmbier, the American student who was there, who was in prison, came back in a coma, and died just a few days later. The president today said, well, I do hold North Korea responsible, but this was after he gave Leader Kim a pass.
I spoke to a friend of Trump's a couple months ago, and he said, you have to remember this guy hates conflict. He'll do it over Twitter. He'll never do it face to face. And so he's there with North Korea.
He said that about President Trump.
Yeah. And so he's there with North Korea. He doesn't want to offend the people in the room with him because he just hates that sort of thing. So he'll just kiss up to anybody in the room and then tweet about them behind their back.
Well, he kisses up, but he kicks down. Yeah. I mean, that's the character or lack of character of the man. In other words, you're nice to people up here, but people who are below you, there's a mistreatment and a maltreatment.
But as I said, when he came back to the United States, he said, I hold North Korea responsible. But that was not what he said when he was over there.
And when Otto Warmbier's parents.
After they said today.
That's
right. Mark Shields, David Brooks, thank you.
Thank you.